video on running technique. I got the idea for this video by observing how runners perform a common warm-up drill known as the heel flick, which essentially involves bringing your heel up towards your bum by using mainly your hamstring muscles, which are located on the back of your thigh. However, from my observations, I realised there was something not quite right about the way that most runners perform this. Let me explain with this demonstration.
Playing on your screen now are two videos demonstrating slightly different variations of the heel flick drill. Video A on your left is the more traditional way that most runners tend to perform this drill, whilst video B on the right shows what I would say is a much more effective way of doing it. While it isn't necessarily wrong to execute the exercise like in video A, as ultimately both variations are still going to warm up the hamstrings, it isn't really specific to a proper running action, because how many people do you see running like that? You can probably see a big difference between the two, because while both videos feature a lot of knee flexion, in video A there is virtually no hip flexion at all, which is in stark contrast to video B. Hip flexion is an integral part of the running gait cycle, for reasons which I'll cover shortly. Here's two stills offering a side-by-side comparison between the two variations.
So hopefully you can see the difference between those two videos, but what exactly is the significance of that? Well, the answer is what's known as the triple flexion movement. Now, I often talk about the importance of the triple extension, which obviously involves this contraction of the glutes, quadriceps and calf muscles to get this nice straight leg behind us so that we can drive off from the floor and have a nice long running stride. But not only is what goes on while we're driving off the ground important, but what takes place when the foot isn't in contact with the floor is also equally as vital as well. So that's what's known as the recovery phase. So basically anything that's where the foot isn't in contact with the floor, so anything from just after toe off, when the leg comes through, and up until the next foot strike, that's your recovery phase. Now, as part of that recovery phase, we have what's known as the triple flexion movement, which is the opposites to the triple extension. So in the triple extension, you have the hyperextension of the hip, extension of the knee, plantar flexion of the foot. Whereas in the triple flexion, you have the flexion of the hip, you have the flexion of the knee, and you have the sort of soft dorsiflexion of the foot. Of course, we're not sprinting, we're talking about distance running, so we're not going to have a major dorsiflexion, but just sort of a soft one. So hopefully you can start to see the point I'm making with the heel flick drill, because which of those two drills does this resemble the most? Of course, it's video B, whereby we're adding in our hip flexion as well. So it's more specific to our running action, and I always think that drills have to be specific to what we're trying to do, the sport that we're doing, because otherwise they're not going to be that effective. Because I see a lot of people doing lots of fancy drills and everything, but actually their applicability to the sport that they're training for can be a bit sort of in question. So instead of doing our heel flicks, whereby we're just flicking our heels out behind us and we're not getting this hyperextension of the hip movement, what we really want to be doing is we want to be tucking our heel up to our bum still, but bringing our knee forward slightly so that we're getting this flexion of the hip as well. So more like the second video, like so. Okay, so why is the triple flexion important? Well, essentially if we don't have a good triple flexion, we're not going to get a good stride either, because otherwise if we allow ourselves to be lazy with our knee flexion and we're not using our hamstrings enough, and or we're not using our hips enough, so we're not bringing our knee up far enough here, then our stride length is going to suffer as a result. So therefore we're going to hit the ground sooner and we're going to have to take another stride and expend energy. Likewise, as a knock-on effect, if we come down sooner, it's also going to affect our triple extension on our other side, because our driving leg isn't going to have as much time to come through if our recovery leg comes down sooner. So we want the recovery leg to be nice and high, so we can have a nice triple extension and have a further stride. So here's a couple of drills that you can do just as a more basic option as well, if you are struggling to get the coordination. So you can just do a walking drill whereby you're practicing that same movement, but you're just tucking your heel into your bum as you're walking along. Or you can do it alternating, so you can progress to this, so you start to introduce the other side as well. And then of course the third option will be to introduce the heel flick drill as well. Now sometimes when people sit at their desks they have quite weak hamstrings, so their hamstrings aren't working through a thorough enough range of motion, and I did do a video a few weeks back on the importance of strengthening our muscles through a good range of motion. So here's an exercise of how you can increase the strength of your hamstrings through a better range. For this exercise you'll need a resistance band. Obviously these come in varying strengths, so pick one that's appropriate for the level of strength you have. And then you'll also need something to tie it onto, like so. So it helps with this one if you sort of loop it round like so first, and then pop it round your ankle, and then make sure it's pulled nice and tight so it doesn't slip off. And then you're going to just go round onto your front, and against the resistance of the band you're going to pull your heel up towards your bum like so. When you reach what you feel is end range, you might feel a little bit of a cramping, so just watch out for that. Just hold for a second or two and then slowly lower against the resistance of the band, so you're utilising that eccentric contraction. But so it's specific to what we want to do here, we want to try and bring your heel as far as you possibly can up towards your bum, because that's essentially what we're trying to do when we do the heel flick drill. Now for me, I personally struggle with this because I've got quite a lot of muscle bulk on the calves and hamstrings, so therefore that will block a lot of range of motion at your joints if that also applies to you. But of course we want to try and just get as far as we possibly can with that. Okay, so you can do these reps to failure, but of course the number of reps that you can do is going to differ depending on how strong your band is. So as a rough guide with a band like this, I would say probably about 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps on each side should be enough, but then you'll probably need to do more if you only have a lighter band. And you should really start to feel that working your hamstring quite nicely. So the aim here is to increase the range in which we're working the muscle, so it's no good just doing it sort of like that. Okay, we want to get our heel as far up towards our bum as we can, so that when we're running we can maintain that endurance of the muscle through that greater range to increase the effectiveness of our triple flexion movement. Okay, so that's your first exercise there. We also have to consider the possibility that some individuals might not be able to perform a very effective triple flexion movement, not because necessarily their hamstrings are weak, but also because their quadriceps are very tight. Now this imbalance can be caused by sitting at our desk, so when we're sitting down, obviously we're shortening our hamstrings, so they're going to get tight but also weak because they're not going to be strong through a very good range of motion. So that can potentially cause an imbalance between the hamstrings and the quadriceps, so the quads might get quite tight, you might start to use them in order to compensate for the weak hamstrings. So therefore, if the quads are very tight and potentially also coming down from the hip flexor, then we're not going to get this nice range of motion, because we'll reach our limits of our knee flexion just here, not because of the hamstring, but because of the tightness just here on this side of the joint. So therefore, if we can do some stretching to alleviate the tightness in our quads and hip flexors, that'll be really good as well. So that's the end of the video. I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you again soon.